Hello, welcome to Life Matters. My name is Christy Starr. Genetic testing. Doctors routinely order genetic tests as they provide the care for a pregnant woman. But what if that screening suggests a problem with the unborn child, an abnormality that might mean mental retardation, deformity, or even early death? The news is shocking, and in the turmoil, a couple often faces pressure from their doctor to do one thing: have an abortion. Rarely do parents hear about the alternative to continue the pregnancy. Well, my guest, Madeline Nugent, has written a book that aims to do just that. The book is called My Child, My Gift, a positive response to prenatal diagnosis. And today on Life Matters, we're going to talk about the experience of parents who accept and choose life for their unborn child with disabilities. Welcome, Madeline. We're so glad you could make it here on the program.
Thanks, Christy.
And I know that you've written actually 7 books,
Yes.
One including one about crisis pregnancy, and the title of that was Having Your Baby When Others Say No.
Yes.
Yes. Well, what prompted you to write this book, My Child, My Gift?
Well, it was a friend of mine who happened to be founder of Catholics for Life, a pro-life organization dedicated to preserving life and helping mothers who have problem pregnancies. Her daughter was pregnant with her second child and went to the doctor for her routine ultrasound. They diagnosed that the child had anencephaly, which is a fatal condition in utero. And the doctor said, you know, your child has this condition, and I'd like you to take this book home and read it, and then get back to me with your decision. So she took the book home, and the book was all about termination of pregnancy for a child with a disability in utero. The daughter showed the book to her mother, who then called me and said, Madeline, you have to write something to help women to have their babies. The daughter went on to have her child. She didn't terminate the pregnancy. She went on and she had a little baby called Joseph, whose picture is in the book, and the book is dedicated to Joseph. Joseph did have anencephaly. He lived for 4 days in the hospital. He had, as all his family visited him, they took many pictures. He had a beautiful funeral after he passed away, and beautiful mass said for Joseph. And it was a time of healing and love for their family. And it was because of Joseph that I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. What typically do parents experience when they find out that their child might be mentally retarded or might have an anencephaly, as you mentioned? What do they encounter?
Well, I think we can just put ourselves in the shoes of the parent who goes for their routine ultrasound and expects to find out if it's a boy or a girl. That's basically what parents want to find out. And all of a sudden the doctor tells them that there's something wrong, quote, quote, wrong with their baby. It's like their whole world has turned upside down now. All of a sudden, their perfect child that they had in their mind is not a perfect child anymore to them. And so they have to readjust to this idea of the baby as the baby is, or could possibly be, because sometimes these diagnostic tests are not correct. But it's a whole matter of trying to readjust and going through all the emotions of trying to adjust to that idea.
How supportive are the doctors when this news is revealed?
Well, there's studies been done on this in regards to their reaction when someone has an adverse diagnosis. There's about 1/4 of the doctors that actually present the information in a way that will either almost try to force the mother to terminate the pregnancy or encourage her to terminate the pregnancy by the manipulation of how the words are said. There's about 50% of the doctors that will try to present both options of terminating or continuing the pregnancy equally. They try not to be biased. And then there might be about 25%, 20% that will try to encourage the woman to go home and think about this and think about how she's going to adjust to the child and encourage her to go through the pregnancy.
Did you find that to be the case, that the attitude of many doctors is that the child should not see the light of day, basically because it is considered, quote, unhealthy, unquote?
Yes, there's some stories in the book. The book has several different stories and comments by parents, but there are some parents who had a child with a fatal condition, who went to several doctors and they were all telling them they had to terminate. The parents went through the pregnancy and had the baby, but it took them a long time to find a supportive doctor.
Mm-hmm. What can you describe a little bit about some of the conditions that genetic testing might reveal for typically which abortion is recommended?
Well, the sad thing about today's culture is that parents are terminating their pregnancies or getting abortions for any kind of a condition that's diagnosed in utero. The most extreme condition wasn't even a disability to most people. It was a couple that had a in vitro fertilization because the husband was sterile, so she had an in vitro fertilization with someone else's sperm and did not realize at the time that the sperm donor had brown eyes and she and her husband had blue eyes. When they did genetic testing on the child who had no disability, it was indicated that the child would have brown eyes and they had a termination. Mm-hmm. They wanted the child to have blue eyes. That was the most extreme case, and to them blue eyes was a disability. Mm-hmm. The disabilities that are being diagnosed, there's over 800 conditions that are being diagnosed in utero. They can go anything from missing digits all the way through to fatal conditions like missing kidneys. Mm-hmm.
I understand you found out something surprising as you were doing the research for the book. Yes. in regard to the accuracy of prenatal diagnosis.
Yes, the initial testing, they did some studies on the initial test. Now they do more refined tests after the initial test, but there's only about 39% of the initial tests that are accurate. The initial testing to show a disability, only 39% of them accurately show that there is a disability. There's many false negatives, you might say.
Over 60% then.
Over 60% of saying that there was a disability present and there wasn't, or it wasn't as severe as they said, or, mm-hmm. or it was a different type of disability or something. It's not accurate. Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty surprising.
That's pretty surprising, and many parents are so frightened just by the possibility of having a disability, and I think this is, we could fault our culture on the way we view people with disabilities mm-hmm. in that regard, that they will terminate if the possibility exists that the baby might have a disability. Mm.
I understand that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the condition that Joseph had. You've dedicated the book to Joseph.
Yes.
We have a picture of Joseph, I believe, that we can show.
That's Joseph, yeah.
And why don't you read a little bit about the medical world views anencephaly, which is what Joseph had.
This is from the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. I picked this particular definition of anencephaly only because it didn't have a lot of medical jargon to it, mm-hmm. and I thought it would be more easily understood. But then I'd like to talk about this a little bit. One is anencephaly. Anencephaly is a defect in the closure of the neural tube during fetal development. The neural tube is a narrow channel that folds and closes between the 3rd and 4th weeks of pregnancy to form the brain and spinal cord of the embryo. Anencephaly occurs when the cephalic or head end of the neural tube fails to close, resulting in the absence of a major portion of the brain, skull, and scalp. Infants with this disorder are born without a forebrain, the front part of the brain, and a cerebrum, the thinking and coordinating part of the brain. The remaining brain tissue is often exposed, not covered by bone or skin. A baby born with anencephaly is usually blind, deaf, unconscious, and unable to feel pain. Although some individuals with anencephaly may be born with a rudimentary brainstem, the lack of a functioning cerebrum permanently rules out the possibility of ever gaining consciousness.
Okay, if I could just stop you right there.
You're stopping me right here, right before the sentence I wanted to read.
Okay, go ahead.
Reflex actions such as breathing and responses to sound or touch may occur.
Okay. So now what I'd like for you to do is to read a description. I guess actually it was a story from this little boy's sister.
Yes.
And she was very much touched by knowing her brother for what, maybe 4 days. He was alive for only 4 days.
Yes.
And